welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. Yeah, it's just me. Anyway, so, yeah, to the agenda. So the agenda always is some sort of version of describing what we are, okay, in terms of, yeah, we're just bugs, we evolved and all that stuff, but we really haven't evolved into something completely different. We're still kind of just, squiggling, eating, fucking, that kind of thing. Just we're not that different than the old cockroaches. And it's just a fact. I'd like to be able to say we have all this high dignity and stuff because of our intelligence, but the fact is that most people aren't using all that high intelligence. They're not doing big thinking. They're doing little penis thinking. And, and all kinds of other skanky, just skanky adventures. But anyway, just the truth. People, a little bit creepy. Anyway, and then the subject sort of is, what we are is the title. There you go. You got to get that one right, and then you got to get the what we can do thing. So there's lots of things we can do. We can worry. We can, analyze. We can do logic. We can be fair. We can be unfair. Lots of things. But we can feel and we can think, and those are two really important parts of what we're doing. With brains, and then there is this, even more refined statement. What should we do? Yeah. So, and that's where you get into words like prevent. Okay, because there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen, and it would be smart if we prevented bad things from happening. That would be clever and intelligent, and it would create a good outcome. It would be positive in terms of elevating the condition. And that's one of the things we're doing is having a condition that can be elevated. It can be good or it can be bad. We can be tortured or comfortably eating cupcakes. That kind of thing. And that's what we're really playing for in this game. And, as I have, one of the rules is it's not a single player game. So it'd be a lot more fun if we could just say it's all about me. And I don't have to consider anybody else. Lots of people already playing the game that way. You hear about them every day in the news. Where they do something to marginalize everybody else, and because they're so important. And what else? Yeah, that's it. So it's not a very complicated agenda. It's such that you're having a conversation with people who just do not want to hear the truth. So they don't like that whole bug story. They want the truth to be that we're spirit soul-y thingies, wandering through the universe doing our spirity soul-y thingy kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know to what end, what possible end they think can all come to. I just don't know how much they're paying attention to the actual facts, the whole geological record that kind of just shows that life has been here for hundreds of millions of years in a form where it has a brain that's doing this thinking, feeling thing. And in all of that time, it didn't have any Aristotle-y kind of conversations, didn't do any contemplating the meaning of being on the earth and hurling through space or any kind of knowing what any of that was about. And that only in the last, it's only like 300 years that people have even had any coherent, really understanding of, that the stars aren't candy, they're not sparkly souls kind of crap. They aren't angels getting their wings or some sort of nonsense. So, it's a tiny portion of, the time life has been on Earth that any of this life has done any of this. Let's talk about what it is to be a living thing. Yeah, and how to do it right instead of do it wrong. No, they haven't had that conversation because they couldn't have it. Just a fact. Didn't have enough information. Didn't have enough brain. And that's the real, the stickling point in the whole conversation is about the fact that, what does life really do? And there's no reason for it to ever do what we did. That is, to gain enough capacity to judge the creation, to contemplate the what evolution has done to us, and to rectify its imperfections, you could argue. To have sex in the missionary position. To modify the game in some way, okay, because we can, because we figure out something about it that's insensitive or, inappropriate or unfair. We can do all that kind of stuff. And it's because of this language thing and intelligence, and nothing else ever acquired it because, yes, it's of no value in a crude competition, a gladiator war. It just doesn't do you any good to have values. They're just going to get in your way. You're not going to win the war having them. But obviously our intelligence does make us win wars, so it is just a truth that over time, it has enhanced the prospects of some civilizations and ruined others. You could argue that the intelligent civilizations that just said, oh, well, we'll talk our way out of it, that didn't work as a strategy, obviously. But the ones that were a little smarter and say, well, we'll buy ourselves an army that can actually fight for us, that's a good strategy. We'll have people, good talkers. We'll have a Benjamin Franklin, you could argue. That's the whole American Revolution really did turn on Benjamin Franklin getting the French, convincing the French to come over here and fight the war for us. Those kind of events are all throughout history, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, there's so much little detail, and sort of the idea is to keep your eye on the real prize pieces, okay, the ones that really matter, and they have more to do with this, general philosophical position that somehow life is some beautiful, wonderful thing, when no, it's a bunch of horrible death. And it's not funny actually, but it does make you, have to do something in response to the mass murder, and that isn't just cry. So so you just kind of mock it and say, come on, you people got to be able to figure this out, that mass murder isn't a great thing to be for. And that's what life is. It's completely dependent on it. The whole purpose of it is to keep making mutations, monstrosities, and to because somehow we need a more perfect winner. And all you do is keep changing how, it's like mass and velocity or something, a momentum, and it always just converts. And so all you do is you make bigger gladiators one year, and then the next year no little ones will be in, because they can sneak up on you or something, hack your ankles. It doesn't really change anything. Nothing really gets improved. It just keeps switching, between two extremes of really, fat and slow and thin and fast, and just keeps doing that. Anyway, so it's not really a competition that's going anywhere, just a competition for the sake of it, because that's what evolution does. And so you could argue, I guess, that it has some progressive features, okay, but it has these regressive ones. So you could argue that crocodile or snake is the regressive, in the sense that these are really old designs that never really fail, okay, that can't fail, because they're so efficient, and all the, they have all the, they have been tested so thoroughly that this car, you're not going to make a better model of this feeding, surviving machine than this model. But then you have the other side of the story, which we are in, which you can keep making these little things that will pop out of the stuff, that have some kind of new feature, new function, but the tests, they haven't survived the test of time. So we might think it's heading somewhere, but probably not. And you can see lots of different varieties, right? I mean, you have birds that have this incredible eyesight. You know, they can see, you know, stuff 2 miles away, and blah blah blah. And, you know, all kinds of different varieties of tools that these mammals have. You know, in terms of their senses and you know, what they can detect and what they can become obsessed with and sensitive to, and you know, what kind of world they're living in terms of what their brain is processing, and but for what, you know, just to be a niche again, everything just fitting into niches, nothing takes over, nothing can ever win, okay, in the sense of take over the world, because as soon as it's like the more popular they get, the more incentive there is to something to figure out how to eat it, you know, for you to become you know, food. So the more successful you are, the more likely you are to be a food source, and so there'll be lots of things competing to destroy you, and you know, that's the balancing part of the contest, is that success is always going to be in some circumstance where it's kind of guaranteed to be to ruin you eventually. So it's like you never want to be the winner. You always want to be third or fourth place, because no one tries to, you know, no one's after you. You know, they're not trying to tear you down. They don't pay any attention to you. They pay attention to the guy who's in the lead. They try to sabotage him, that kind of thing. Something like that, anyway. What does all that have to do with this? Yeah, just to point out that, you know, it's just a gladiator system, and yes, it does create this nuance, and we could say, okay, well, look, humans are really interesting because they can do all this thinking and worrying and crying, and yeah, I know it's not a good thing. Yeah, they can do a lot of stuff that's really interesting, you know, and you know, hard to just negate it as not being something rather spectacular, even, you know, that we can contemplate our existence and do all of this stuff, abstractions and whatnot. But yeah, the bottom line is, though, for what purpose? Because, you know, that organism can't do anything with that power except play a game there's no point in playing, which is kill, you know, eat, fuck, die. It's just not there's not an intelligent enough game to play. And so all you're stuck with is, okay, we can come up with some intelligent strategies to deal with all of our vulnerabilities and all of the problems that we have. And we don't even spend much time doing that, frankly. You know, again, here we are, 2026. Finally, some portions of the world are starting to figure out that there's no point in torturing people while they're dying. You might as well let them die gracefully than, you know, naturally. So they're figuring out a little bit of that, but it's only a little bit. You know, still they haven't got the basic idea right. You know, that there's just no point in it. There's no point in being this pro-life loonies and saying things must die naturally or, you know, by God's rules. And that's really what it comes down to. So the very fact that, you know, we're so late in this game of intelligence, and there's still the most people somehow hatch with this religious perspective, or religious tendency. And mostly because the only people that are dumb enough to have kids are people that have these religious notions and ideas of, you know, optimism, that aren't seeing nature for what it is. A horrific bloodbath. You know, death every day. You know, you just can't. You have to be trying to miss it, because it's so gratuitous. You know, in the volume of ugly horror and such. So anyway, now it's enough of a beginning. Let's see where we go. Take a pause. Alright, back. I don't know if I'm ready to be back, but I'm back anyway. So, I was thinking, Uh, yeah, it's all this. It's just, there's so much stuff that's distracting. So it's like even in making this video, I have to, you organize thoughts, but you don't really know which way you're going to end up going, and it's all kind of, messy and sloppy. Um, and our lives are like that too. Like, so I could have this serious conversation about what it is to be alive on Earth, and doing all this calculating of the important questions to resolve the problem of wasted torture and torment. Because that's sort of important. But yes, we're all distracted by so much of this other stuff of just being the kind of bugs we are, in the sense that every bug has a certain thing it does, and we as humans have acquired this capacity to just sort of mimic, to oh, there's another word for that. When you watch somebody else do it and then you just imitate it. Imitation. That's another word, and there's just still another word, but can't remember it. But anyway, and so that's what we do, tend to, and so we end up, with a psychology that could be triggered by little bullshit that doesn't matter, stuff that we get, that somehow it bothers us if it isn't right, so and it's just stuff that really couldn't matter. You could argue that some people are, worried about whether the grass along the edge of their sidewalk is perfectly trimmed. And then other people, the car has to be just right, or just this or just that. And, everything's just, in the house, people could worry about the flower pot or some other kind of crap, and it bothers them if something isn't right and something isn't the way they always have it, and it's, change is always disruptive. And this is all little bullshit, and the stuff that you're just saying, in a life and death struggle, the fact that people could get distracted by this crap is kind of amazing. And then, when it happens to yourself all the time, you're saying, wow, that's really amazing, that I could, I left a plant out in the cold and it got frozen, and, it just, pisses you off and irritates you, and now your whole day is ruined because of some stupid thing that really can't matter much, but it matters to me because I had a plan and an idea, and it's not going to be what I wanted it to be, and so it's going to bug me in some stupid way. And then I'll make it bug me even more bigger way, because I'll say, well, this is just a trend. You've been getting less and less, you've been letting this kind of stuff happen a lot lately, Gary, and you're you're just not doing, you don't seem to give a damn, blah blah blah, some kind of, and then I could say, yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's right. And it's hard to say which is the right way to be, entirely, because you can't let go of everything, because then there's nothing to live for. But yes, I mean, living for the trivial shit is bullshit, but it's the stuff that means something to you for some dopey reason. Again, it's like, some people, it's like what they watch on TV, what kind of sports people watch, all that kind of stuff, what kind of game seems interesting or appealing, what kind of contest. All very subjective, all very dependent on how you're introduced to the stuff, and yeah, it's just, there's just a lot of nuance and minutia, if you want to call it, little, who cares-y kind of details, but that's what a lot of our life is made out of. It's controlled by even all of these stupid little things that might have happened to you when you were 4 years old, and it's you're still defined by it. Confined, I guess, would be a word too, by it. But that's all part of the problem of being alive and human, is, we can do all this, all this seeing, and we can do all this worrying, and it could be worry about nothing or worry about something, but it's what we tend to do. So I mean, that's part of why the intelligence exists, is because it does make us capable of extending, this whole monitoring system of trying to create a defense and an offense. So, and because of intelligence, it's almost like having an infinite military budget or something. The intelligence wants to keep extending the vision of who goes there. More detectors of trouble coming, more, blah, 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 and the same for the aggressive part, and so we become, slaves to all of this worry and all of this, I don't know, obsession, all of this striving to fit in, or striving to be better, or striving to, the competition thing always sort of roots its, the evil of it is always, in all these little contests that we're constantly participating in terms of most everything we do. You could argue I just went, like clearing your throat is not a great thing to do in a video. So, I get points off, It's like there's something, constantly taking score, and, for all of us in terms of our performance, and we're all judging ourselves based on all these kind of wacky and sometimes just completely irrational notions of success and failure. Obviously, there's a bunch of people I see who seem to have a very high opinion of themselves, and you're just like, you wouldn't want to spend 10 minutes being them, and so you just marvel at it, how they contrive this perception of success and victory. And I guess there's likewise the other side of that story. People who have what appears to be, there's lots of people who are attractive enough, if you could say, and this and that, and then they have some complex, they're not thin enough, they're not this enough, and, they'll kill themselves trying to, beat some standard that's stuck in their head that tells them it's not good enough. So, we're all blighted by all of this psychology. Just to get to the playing field, you still have to carry all this personal shit. And then we finally get to the jury box, so to speak, or the place where we're supposed to do something serious. And, we're still this. We're still motivated by a lot of triggers and emotions and notions and, feelings that just get in the way of doing the objective job of saying yes or no to something, or be for it, against it. Something like that anyway. So so that's one of the, I'm just noticing it more and more, just as I don't know why some of that stuff becomes more obvious as you get older. I could say I don't know if there's a good reason. It's just because I think if things would have gone differently, that is, if the world didn't go to shit, and if everything didn't look like crap, and everything looks like just doom for the future, I probably, wouldn't be thinking this negatively about my own circumstance. So I guess that's part of it. It's just that you just get more and more disconnected from the world, and so you just feel more and more defeated. And I suppose that's part of what's just changed things for me, is the fact that I'm personally having that kind of problem where I'm feeling baited, defeated, beaten. You're burdened, where before it was a fight and you just fought it. You didn't bother thinking about it, I suppose. Didn't think much about it. About how you felt about being in that role or something. Yeah, you just lived being in it. And now I don't just live. It's just, there's something else in the way. Some processing of every single day where I'm, analyzing it much more than I used to, instead of just doing whatever had to get done and not worrying about it much. Just, more do than think. And now I'm becoming more think, and it's all kind of negative think, than do. And yeah, it's not my preference. It's not the preferable condition to be in, I would guess, or state. So that's all about distractions, I guess, though. If you got some sort of exercise thing or some hobby thing or some other kind of thing, I guess you can, create enough distractions where you won't get mired down in too much overthink about how unpleasant it is. Yeah. Or how much you'd rather be doing something else, or all of that crap. Something like that, anyway. Well, anyway, okay. So, yeah, so I think I'll think some more, see if we can get back to the closer to the subject. I mean, the subject just isn't that complicated, right? I mean, it's just this simple argument about how it's really a bug planet, and it just needs raid. It needs to be cleansed of all of this wasted competition, all of this wasted DNA run amok kind of crap, and we're part of that mess, and we're just doing we're doing more harm to ourselves and the environment than we're doing any good. Okay, because there's no good to be done as a living thing. You just can't do anything, because nothing's broken until you show up and start making a problem, and start creating things that are crying and upset and unhappy and in pain. So when you start creating those things, you start making the problem. So it's really that simple, that the problem is made by the sensitive organism that can be tormented, and the tormenting is not acceptable. And that's sort of the simple statement, is that it's not an acceptable price to pay. Torture and torment, and it's not an acceptable price. If we're going to do something, we have to do it at a lower price, because the price is too high, and you really can't do that. So that's sort of the subject, is there's no real practical way to escape the liabilities, the dangers, the threats, and there's nothing really to make out of the positive except your own impression. So it's almost like, it's almost talking about pretty flower or something. It's so subjective and so built into some sort of subjective, love of symmetry mechanism, that yes, anything, symmetrical and multicolored will appeal to our senses and fool us into thinking, oh, that's a good thing, when no, it's not a good thing. It's just our brain saying it's good when it's really not. So it's all that subjective beauty bullshit that, it's not objective. It's not, it's not empirical. It's not tested by some perfect standard of the definition of beautiful, or worthy, or any of that. And that's what we struggle to do, is to try to be smart and clever, and, well, clever is the wrong word, to make all of those judgments intelligently, not subjectively. All right, now that's enough for now. So I'll be back, and such, so forth, and whatnot. Alright, seems to be back. Anyway, still me, mostly. Alright, so, yeah, just thinking, okay, trying to say, okay, there's just this simple idea. You have the story of evolution, our construction, and really, again, it's just the construction of machines, okay, that are just intended to reproduce. And so that's what they're rewarded for. is just getting this DNA molecule into the future. And so just making a device to carry a DNA molecule into the future. And so it's kind of a crude and ugly kind of purpose that we exist because of. So that's the function, is just to make these Frankensteins, these monstrosities. And that's what they all are. Because they're all, it's just error code. It's like, let's not copy it right, let's copy it wrong. And sometimes we have happy accidents, and the mutations are in some way positive. And your hands turn into claws or something. We all turn into crabs. Yeah, but that's apparently a design that nature likes a lot, is the crab. Spiders do it. Lots of different organisms turn into crabs. But anyway, not really the subject. But just the idea of thinking about evolution and just how many, I mean, you can't really think even 1,000 years is kind of hard for the brain to imagine 1,000 years of life and death, and then to contemplate millions, yeah, hundreds of millions of years of Frankensteins, being created just to be annihilated, and all the terrible ways they get annihilated. All the little critters, all the little puppies and kittens, and all this stuff stomped and strangled and torn to pieces and ripped into shreds, and having to survive injuries that are catastrophic, and spend days dying slowly and miserably and horribly. And gee, let's not do that anymore. That's just, if we've done that for 1,000,000 years, we've done it for more than it. We've given it a good enough try, and it's time to just let that one go. Let's not do that 1,000,000 more years. Let's not do it another 10. Yeah, just let it go. Too stupid. So just, and so, it's only this people who, try to find some other context for existence and try to pretend that all of this is for some purpose. And, that everything goes to some heaven, and there's all this, whatever, dancing and prancing in some utopia. And utopia defined by what? Obviously, we don't share enough common sensations, to even define heaven the same way. What would be a heaven? Some people would have it smelling all flowery and fluffy, and other people would have it smelling like a, festering pond. Because everybody has a different sense of what smells good, or what tastes good, or what feels good, or what anything's. And so, well, anyway, that's not really the subject. But it sort of is, because it's the reason why these videos aren't very effective, is just because people are so different. They just don't arrive here and end up doing the same kind of thing, in terms of making deductions about existence. Some of them stay little kids their whole lives, and some people grow up way too fast, you could argue. And grow up, I don't mean to be derogatory towards other people, but I just mean there are, it's just there are facts of existence, and it's just that most people are, repugnant. They can't, they don't want the facts, they don't want to hear the facts, they want to deal with the facts, they just want to pretend some, better story overlays all of this ugly death. And that's really what it is. It's a lot of ugly death. Plus all the extra, the stuff that doesn't kill you just makes you miserable. And why would somebody wish that on something else? Hard to figure out why somebody would think, well, that's a good idea. even if you thought that there was some reason, your ego was so big that you thought there was some reason to make another you, um, why wouldn't it scare you a little that the other you might end up affirmed in some way, broken, only one eye works or something, some defect that would be quite irritating and uncomfortable. And why would you say that's okay? I don't mind imposing that. No big deal. So anyway, yeah, that's not really the argument I want to make. I mean, the argument from pleading with people to recognize how cruel it is to just pretend all of the bad lives don't happen, and that they're not the actual price you have to pay to have whatever the good lives are you think there are. And the very fact that people who are living in squalor and mediocrity think they're living good lives, that's the part that's really scary, right? I mean, it's the people living on the garbage dump, having babies, and you're just like, what's, somehow they're not doing very good logic. I'm thinking they're living the good life, a good enough life, to sentence somebody else to, to be clamped into that ball and chain and relive all of this nonsense over and over. These charming days, on the garbage pile. Come on, that's sick. That's pathetic. But people do it all the time. I mean, that's what we're really arguing with, is that people are, this pretending that they're all winning, is just so hard to understand. I guess is the hard to think that people could be that much of a unperfectionist, that they could accept things being so foul and bad. Yeah, but we accept wars, right? People accepted living with war, where any day their kid could be killed. I mean, it's their kids, and their kids are off somewhere fighting in a war, and they just go about their business. Blah, 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 blah. And how the hell could you do that? How could life go on, so to speak? It just doesn't make much sense from my perspective, how I could contrive that to make sense, that I could find some, okay, this is worth doing. And that after that experience, where you've had to endure the threat of, having your kid have his face blown off, and you survive it, and then after you survive it, you just basically say, oh yeah, let's, keep doing this game we're playing because we're playing it so well. This whole idea of having world wars. Oh yeah, well, okay, another 10 years, there'll be another one, so what? To accept this, nasty attrition as being part of the game you're going to play. Ew. Again, just ew. I used to say, how do people find that acceptable? But again, just dying of natural causes isn't any better. I mean, nature's not going to kill you any worse than the war is. It's just the war kills you sooner. And so that's sort of the joke. And the joke of, again, the whole notion of a God that doesn't even have enough respect for us to give us a default. At least we should die well if you lived well. So that would be a sign of how well you lived, is how well God kills you. If deserve had something to do with it, then people would behave so much better, and so it'd be a win-win, if God was rational enough to give us the reward of not hideously killing us, in some just terribly brutal, awful manner, then it might be understandable. But again, so there's no connection. And the religious people just don't care. They just don't care that their God couldn't even have enough respect for us, in our capacity to be persuaded, to give us anything to, cling to or to hope for, to give you any signal that there's any chance that this fable has anything to do with reality. I mean, just nothing. So a reasonable person just isn't given any choice because there's just nothing. There's nothing. I mean, God doesn't do the simplest reasonable thing. I mean, the very fact that he couldn't put the word microbe in the Bible somewhere, beware of the microbe. I mean, he could have hidden the text in there somewhere, the hidden six-legged blah, 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 or something. The squiggly blah, blah. But nothing, no indication, no let us in on it, okay, that the pestilence isn't just magic. It does come from some real material process. So all that is the important part, right? Is that, for centuries people believed all kinds of mythology had to do with diseases. And, we're still stuck there because it's still most people on Earth still have a whole mythology philosophy. They have this whole idea that God is in control and God makes things happen and God has something to do with the story. And it's all a false and phony context. And it's comforting in some ways, but it's just a lie. And, I mean, I just saw the garden gnome, and I'm just saying, it's okay to put garden gnomes in your garden. It's okay to pretend when it doesn't matter, but you can't pretend about the important things, okay? I mean, it's okay for us all to cut ourselves a break and say pretty flower and not worry about, evolution and what it all represents, and it's a bunch of spores and it's a bunch of DNA trying to take over, and, you don't have to think about all this negative context. There's nothing, we don't have to see the ugly truth everywhere. But, when you're going to have a conversation about what it really is to be alive, well, yeah, you have to have the real conversation. You can't have the fable, the bullshit conversation. And people just won't do that. So, they just won't be fair to the facts, and they'll contrive some excuse to be, I guess, first pro-human, and sometimes pure white human or something. And they'll come up with some order of defending what just isn't defendable, and only because they have some notion in their head, okay, that they are worthy of being propagated into the future, and that the future needs to have one of them wandering about, whatever, tasting things, chewing the furniture. And it doesn't, okay, so, obviously, the future nothing needs anything but these stupid organisms. And so if you don't have the brain walking around worrying and needing, then you don't have any needs. Simple truth. All right, well, take a break and see where I end up. All right, back, I think. Yep, mostly. I think it's me, yes. Okay, so we're back to what are we, right? And so the simple argument is that I know I'm a machine, and I'm pretty sure that's all you are, okay? It's a biological machine. You're built by a DNA molecule inside of a uterus, ew. But all the organisms are built in a similar way, with a bunch of cellular division and all the little specialized cells and all the little things, and to build a critter, okay, that pops out and then goes into the environment, consumes, grows, conquers, and then replicates, to prove it's a better machine. Saying it, so it's just like playing musical chairs, except there's a lot less chairs than there are participants. So a gigantic number of things have to die. Your brothers and sisters, essentially. That's how the system was made naturally. So just a few hundred years ago, you would have every expectation that if you were a survivor, that you made it to maturity, that you would have memories of your dead siblings. Yeah, that would be a thing you did. Yes, was remember your dead brother or your dead sister, because it was likely you had one of those, or a dead mother, frankly. It was that kind of grisly kind of world. And again, it was all acceptable. Anyway, so we're machines, and what do? We think and we feel, and all I'm suggesting is we should think about not feeling bad because it sucks. And so the easy way not to feel bad is not to feel in the first place. So prevention is the easy way to stop bad things from happening, is just to prevent them from happening. And so that's the easy victory, is a nice benign, you don't have to kill anything, you don't have to stop anything, you don't have to do anything, you just prevent, okay, the eggs from being laid, and then you don't have a problem. There's nothing to worry about. No more machines that need to be cared for, and that have to be annihilated, you know, on purpose, as part of the machine. The machine can't function without its disposal. You have to get rid of the old to have the new. You can't play replicate and prove yourself and lay eggs without throwing in the get annihilated, murder. You have to be murdered. And again, this is just murder. It's not some graceful, dignified end that we come to. We come to a very undignified, horrible end. And the fact that there's so few people squealing about it does surprise me, frankly. I'm going to squeal before it even happens. And I'm sure once it does happen, I'll squeal. I'm sure, to some extent, once your life is so miserable, you don't even want to be bothered anymore. But, yeah, I just don't know why, there isn't more older people informing the younger people that being old isn't all that. It's not all that much fun to just sitting around waiting for your diagnosis, okay, and your treatment options, and all of that fun. Yeah, no, it's really sucks, and only an insane psychopath could say, "This is what I want to do." With something called my golden years, is to be constantly threatened with murder. No, I don't want to do that. And the only way you can't do that is to be somebody who's deliberately just saying, I'm just going to pretend it isn't true, and I'm going to live as if it isn't true. And that's my only choice, is to live, just pretend. Because, yes, the reality is just too bleak and too horrible. And to sell that to the future is that's just so unfair. Yeah, that's cheating so bad. To pretend that the future should live in a delusion that it's all going to be okay, when no, it's not all going to be okay. And it's all going to be murder. Is what it is. Every single story ends with a murder. Now, there's no getting around the fact that a few of us get off easy. You die in your sleep, but it ain't most, and it ain't even it probably isn't even a significant, like detectable percentage, like 1%, 2% kind of thing. It's probably a tiny percentage that get off easy. And some of those are people who are been in comas for 10 years. So they had plenty of misery leading up to it, and they just didn't turn the machines off. So they didn't technically die in their sleep. They died. They had a real death. Okay, it wasn't just one day they were fine and the next day they were dead. There was plenty of misery and suffering and horror and all of that. So, yeah. And, yeah, so that's the context, just arguing that why would somebody be defending murdering things forever? What's the point? Okay, so until if you don't get rid of the murder part, there's no point in doing the life thing. And then you can figure out that the life thing, there's no point in doing it because it's all just a delusion of grandeur. It's just a delusion that somehow there needs to be another baseball game played. Because somebody hasn't seen one yet. Well, why can't they watch one from 1942? Well, I guess the 42 wouldn't be televised, but you know what I mean. They could watch one from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. you know, and yeah. So what do you need to replay the game for? What do you need to make the movie over and over again for? What do you need this live performance art? Why? When all you're doing is some silly rooting thing for some arbitrary logo that's on a hat. Come on, it's all ridiculous. Everything you're living for and everything you're living to get is all ridiculous, frankly. And we should stop being ridiculous. So that's a simple should statement. What should we do? Stop being ridiculous. Stop investing in ridiculous. Stop pretending, okay, you're winning, and because you're not. You're watching everything lose, and you're watching way too much lose way too badly. Let's put it that way. To defend it, it's way too expensive, and again, not your money yet. See, you're not sitting there. No, you're not in the electric chair, yet. So I mean, I'm sure some of you are. They're listening, so I'm sure some of you are like me. You're just sitting there in the chair, just just saying, "Oh shit, shit. What am I doing here? How did I get here? I didn't sign up for this. I don't want any part of this shit." Yeah. Somebody else signed you up, and that's the whole argument is try to stop these people from signing up other people in the future. I mean, that's the only way I can stop being perpetually signed up, is I have to convince the people who do sign up other people without having any good reason to think they want it, and think they do want it. They do want to play stupid game, okay, for a stupid prize, and to be murdered in the end anyway. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to play that game. So come up with a different game, and maybe, but not that game. I ain't playing that on purpose. I'm certainly not going to. I'm certainly not going to defend your decision or to say you're being fair or reasonable or anything like intelligent to argue that you really do have a plan, because you really don't. You haven't thought it through. You haven't really thought about the fact that it is just mass murder, and why would you defend mass murder? What's the point of that? I mean, if it was happening on another planet, maybe you'd be able to see it and say, gee, that's pretty dumb. Look, they're living to die. And living to die badly. It's not like they die fun, that they get some candy and treats. No, it's all very negative. They're stripped of everything, and they're, crushed very slowly and miserably and turned into, dust right before our eyes. All dignity removed. Ew. So if it was happening on another planet, maybe people could see it. Maybe if there was another planet that was just doing the same thing that's happening here on the Earth, except everything was blue, like we were blue, and something else was flesh colored, or what, what I'm saying. If just the colors were different or some kind of stupid thing like that, then we'd probably be able to see, gee, that's pretty dumb. Look at that ridiculous ocean. It's just full of all these dumb, ignorant animals just, eating and pooing each other. Constantly eating and pooing each other. It's just, ew. What are they doing that for? It's gross. No. So, anyway. Alright, take a pause. See if we can finish up. Alright, back. Finishing up. So I was thinking about the difference. I mean, look, you could watch some old event from the past, like I pointed out, and you could just look in the stands and figure out that, 85% of the people are dead. And they all have a story of dying. Some crappy story, generally speaking. All kinds of dying more than once, surviving, being survivors and then dying eventually of something else because that's what's going to happen. You never really survive anything. And you're just doing it over and over again, dying, over and over again. I mean, that's the modern, I mean, it doesn't seem like such a very great advancement to die more than once. That seems like a negative, not a positive. But anyway, it's that, the clinging thing, and it just can't let go, especially when you're trying to preserve a life that isn't any fun anyway. Not nearly as fun, anyway. Let's just say a life of kind of crippling arthritis and disabilities and all kinds of other shit. Yuck. But then I was thinking about the animals, and it's even in a way just more brutal in the sense that they never even have any delusion of accomplishment and all that kind of stuff. They just have this grind of, eking out their existence and, constantly being afraid and all this stuff, and then they just suffer, badly and die, and you can't even put a label on it like, oh, well, they did some physics or they did something, that was something to write a book about. There's no books to be written, certainly. But again, that wouldn't make much difference anyway. If you had 10 dogs and 10 cats that did something brilliant and you could write a book about them, how does that fix anything? Doesn't make it all okay. So the fact that some humans do something spectacular and they're worthy of recognition and, names and lights and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't buy them immunity in the first place from failure and death. And, it doesn't change the fact that all of us, are living so much less lives, okay, in the sense that we're not going to be, the book ain't going to be written. And, it's certainly not going to be written when you need it to be written. You're not going to, I mean, most of us don't get the chance to see if we could make a mess out of being a millionaire, I mean, there's, it does appear that people can't really be millionaires in any kind of graceful way, that somehow they have to make a mess out of it. Just seems that way, frankly. Just observing the lifestyles of the rich and famous, it does seem like they find ways to fail, to fuck it up, to make a mess out of it. Their advantage, let's call it. Anyway, so yeah. Do I have anything else? Yeah. Not really. So yeah, but it's all for what? Again, none of the average human's life is just a grind. They just might as well be a dog or a cat because they're not going to do anything spectacular. They're just going to live a life of moving from little baking cookies to doing this to doing just little bullshit tasks, chores, duties. A few little moments of gratification here and there. But a lot of tedious and unpleasant and irritating and annoying and, not enough vacation, way too much school. Just not that great. Is that worth defending? Is that a play that needs to be rewritten over and over again where, I guess that's the trick of it, right? You can't even show the actual proportions because you'd have to have a way too big a cast. Because it's like, yes, for every one person whose life is interesting, there's 999 lives that ain't so much, that are kind of just not a waste. Well, yeah, it's a waste. It's always a waste, but it's it's not functioning on any level, okay, besides animalistic and crude and and pointless in the sense of just some sort of crazy story in their head, like just a crazy person walking down the street, talking to the aliens who are underground or something. they might as well be, because they're so disconnected from actually understanding their own existence. And they're so controlled by just all this little monkey psychology. The interacting with their little group of opposing players, the family, and the the things they're after and the things they're chasing, and it's all quite ridiculous and a waste and stupid and yeah. So so I guess that's enough of a video. Covered the subjects pretty much. But that's all there really is, right? There's just an accurate description of our, bug-like mechanical function, and a recognition that feeling and thinking are interesting things, especially the thinking thing. I mean, kind of wondrous. But the if you're at all obedient to the facts, you can figure out that there's no price worth paying, because there's nothing to do here. There's nothing for a living, feeling, thinking thing to do except play really dumb games like mass murder. There's no other. There's nothing else to do here. Okay, but make a mess. You can't rescue anything except us. Yeah, we're the only thing we're the only thing on the railroad tracks. So, it's just untying ourselves and getting ourselves out of the jeopardy as the real game. Get sentient organisms, liberate them from this constant obligation to play a dumb game to a bad finish. Yeah, that's probably enough. Probably a better summation, but whatever. It'll do, pig. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll just say it will. I'll pretend it will do. And so then it will do, because I'll pretend it did. But anyway, till next time and such, and so forth.